Welcome to a sleepy journey. But not a boring one. Tonight, we'll turn the pages of the tumultuous history of the Ashkenazi Jews, from their earliest exiles to the deeply ingrained memories of resistance flowing through their veins. You're in a stone house on the edge of Mainz, around the year 1071. The roof leaks a little when it rains, and tonight, it is raining. Outside, the Rhine murmurs like a lullaby, though it smells faintly of fish and muddy iron. Inside, a woman rocks her newborn in a cradle that creaks like an old door hinge. She hums a tune, part psalm, part lullaby, while her left hand absent-mindedly pats down the folds of her worn apron. The air smells of bitter herbs, smoke, and damp wood. You wrinkle your nose, not unpleasant, just earthy. You're here as the ghost of a visitor, unseen but somehow soothed by the fire's crackle and the soft rhythm of her voice. It's been a hard winter, but tonight, something warm has entered the world. You wouldn't survive this week. Honestly. You'd complain after 2 hours. No Wi-Fi. No running water. And heaven forbid you stub your toe on the uneven floor, you'd file a complaint with the nearest bishop. Spoiler, he'd ignore you, so, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here on Ashkenazi Historian. And hey, where are you listening from? Drop your location and local time in the comments below. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. She names the baby Yehudit. Not because it's fashionable, because it isn't. But because it's the name of her mother, and her mother's mother. In this family, names are not new, they're reminders. This mother, her name is Rizel, does something quietly revolutionary. She leans down, kisses her baby's forehead, and whispers a bracha. Not a grand blessing in the synagogue, no, this one is stitched from kitchen Hebrew and Yiddish lullabies, the kind of prayer women have passed from one cracked lip to another for centuries. Scholars will one day call these folk rituals. But to Rizel, it's simply how you love a child. Outside, a crier stomps down the street, yelling something about a bishop's arrival and a new tax on foreign traders. Inside, Rizel folds her baby's blanket tighter and murmurs, "You will not be taxed for your soul." Historians still debate whether Jewish women in 11th century Mainz had formal religious education. Some say they couldn't read Hebrew. Others point to signatures on ketubot, letters written in Hebrew-Yiddish fusion. And even a preserved shopping list that includes 2 candles and a line of psalms. Rizel, if she's one of the literate ones, doesn't show off. She doesn't have time. But she sings the Eshe Chayil on Fridays from memory, even if her voice cracks on the high notes. The community in Mainz is small, tight-knit, and quietly afraid. Rumors of crusaders have begun to trickle in, like water under a locked door. Rizel's husband is a scribe, not particularly brave, but useful. He copies documents in a cramped script that has driven 2 scribes blind and 1 to Hungary. You watch him sit in the next room, hunched, muttering, scratching ink. But it is Rizel who holds the house together. She is, quite literally, the roof beam and the hearth. Her kitchen is her sanctuary. In this kitchen, onions are pickled in salt. Fish is preserved in barrels with labels only she can decipher. And on the highest shelf, hidden behind a sack of lentils, lies a scroll. Not Torah, no. A different kind. A hand-copied birthing charm, passed down from her grandmother's attic in Worms. It's wrapped in waxed cloth, and it smells of smoke and rosewater. When Yehudit cries, and she cries often, Rizel hums a melody older than her marriage. It's in a minor key, the kind that tugs at your ribs. There are no toys in the cradle, just a smooth piece of wood carved with the shape of a pomegranate. A luxury. A prayer in disguise. You sit with them for a while. The night stretches, soft and deep. A neighbor bangs on the wall. Someone yells something about spoiled meat. No one replies, and then the oil lamp flickers. Here's a strange little fact: Ashkenazi women often gave birth surrounded not by men, or doctors, but other women, neighbors, midwives, grandmothers who'd seen enough births to consider them ordinary, sacred, and slightly boring. The men stayed away, busy debating things like whether an angel could make an appearance in a butcher's dream. The women simply got things done. Rizel does not know what the future holds. But she knows her job is to preserve what is good and true. So she teaches her daughter early, taste the bitter herb first, so the honey means something. By morning, Yehudit will cry again. Rizel will be tired. The fire will need stoking. But tonight, a song passes from mother to daughter, invisible, indelible. You close your eyes, somewhere down the line, Yehudit's great-great-granddaughter will carry that same melody in a displaced tongue, in a new land, with bitter herbs of her own. You blink, and the cradle is gone. The floorboards shift. The stone walls melt into timber. You are no longer in Mainz. Now, you're in Speyer. It's 1096. Spring has arrived early, but it carries no joy. You step into a kitchen that smells of goat milk and fear. The woman here, not Rizel this time, is named Brindle. She's younger, sharper-tongued, and her baby won't latch. She mutters in Yiddish, switching to a prayer, then back to Yiddish. The baby screams like it's owed something. Outside, boots stomp. Not Jewish ones. These are Crusader boots, damp from river crossings, eager for salvation through sword. Brindle knows they're coming. Everyone does. So she opens the cabinet beneath the hearth, pulls out a folded cloth, and unwraps what looks like a bundle of laundry. But it's not linen. It's parchment. A Torah fragment, ink faded from too much touching, margins filled with the scribbles of a scribe who might have had a sense of humor. One note says, "Fix this when awake." He never did. She kisses it, gently, reverently, and tucks it into a hollow behind the kitchen wall. Seals it with a brick. Smears the mortar with flour paste and soot. Now it looks like it's always been there. You wouldn't notice it unless you knew it was there. Which, of course, you wouldn't, you, with your GPS and your apps and your habit of Googling which spices go in cholent. You'd be caught before sundown. Probably while asking for oat milk. Brindle, meanwhile, is feeding her baby with one hand and planning for siege with the other. The baby fusses, spits up. She doesn't flinch. So far, Crusaders haven't touched Speyer. But news from Worms and Mainz travels quickly, on the backs of merchants and the lips of weeping kin. In Worms, they say, hundreds died for refusing baptism. They say the synagogue ran red. They say mothers did unthinkable things to protect their children from forced conversion. Historians argue whether those rumors were exaggerated. Some call them martyrdom. Some call them trauma legends, preserved to shield survivors from unbearable guilt. No one agrees. But the fear is real. It curls in Brindle's stomach like spoiled cheese. The baby finally sleeps. Brindle lights a single candle and leans her head against the table. You hear her whisper something, not a prayer, just a name. Her husband's. He's gone ahead to try her. He said he'd come back. She doesn't believe him. There's something you should understand. While men debated halakha and carried legal weight in the community, women like Brindle carried something heavier, the silent task of memory. They weren't scholars in the yeshiva sense. But they were vessels. Preservationists. Human hard drives, if you like, with lace head coverings and a sharp eye for neighborly treachery. When asked what women did during the First Crusade, textbooks usually say, suffered. And they did. But they also hid, lied, planned, and remembered. One mother hid a Torah scroll under her bed and claimed it was dowry linen. Another bribed a guard with a wheel of cheese wrapped around a coin. And some, like Brindle, became accidental archivists of a vanishing world. There's an obscure tradition, a fringe detail, if you will, where women would smear honey on the lips of children reading Torah for the first time. To make the words sweet. To plant pleasure where fear might grow. Brindle never got that chance. But the scroll she hides smells faintly of honey and milk. Somewhere outside, a Crusader sneezes. Close, Brindle stiffens. You, meanwhile, have gone completely still. You can smell the candle wax now. Hear the baby breathing. Your pulse is loud in your ears. You think, she won't make it, but she does, for now, by morning, the soldiers will pass through, drunk and confused, demanding wine and blessing themselves with Yiddish curses they misheard in taverns. One will stomp through the kitchen, see nothing but a tired mother and a half-full jug of milk, and leave. The Torah fragment will remain hidden for 300 years, until a grandson of her grandson remodels the kitchen and finds it behind crumbling plaster. He won't know what it is, but he'll be afraid to throw it away. He'll send it to a rabbi in Poland, who will weep silently over the smudged ink and say nothing. The baby, by the way, survives. His name is Yekuziel. He'll grow up to become a ritual slaughterer with a limp and a tendency to misquote psalms. But he'll tell his children, your mother once hid the Torah in a wall so you could drink milk in peace. You breathe in the kitchen one last time. Soot. Milk. Candle. Quiet Torah, it is enough, you've wandered north now, and east. The centuries shift like bed linens, and when you lift your head again, you're in Prague, it's the 1300s. The ghetto is not yet called a ghetto, that word won't be coined for another 200 years in Venice, but the walls are there. Stone, narrow, unswept. They smell of wet boots, chicken feathers, and humanity. You'd get lost here before you got robbed, but either way, you wouldn't last long. You walk down an alley so thin, the buildings on either side practically kiss. Someone above dumps wash water from a pail. It misses you by a thread of divine mercy. Somewhere, a baby screams, you follow the sound to a wooden door marked only with a horseshoe, nailed upside down. Inside, a midwife is tying on an apron that already has 2 kinds of stains and 3 kinds of secrets. Her name is Cyril. She's about your grandmother's height, your aunt's volume, and your cousin's sarcasm. The room smells sharp, herbs, iron, and just a hint of burning chamomile. She's boiling something in a blackened pot. The baby on the table is purple and slippery, mid-scream. The mother is pale, teeth clenched, eyes red with joy or exhaustion, probably both. Cyril murmurs something to the baby in a blend of Yiddish and Czech, then wipes the child with a cloth that used to be part of a curtain from the old synagogue. Resourceful, always. Now here's the trick, this isn't just a birth, it's a meeting, because Cyril isn't just a midwife. She's part of a loose web of women who pass information, coded messages tucked into herbal packets, recipes that double as warnings, and gossip laced with instruction. She sends word about unsafe roads by mentioning whether thyme is in season. A letter to a cousin might say, the rosemary is bitter this year, which means, don't go to Krakow, bandits have bribed the guards. Her niece bakes loaves with notches in the crust to show which direction refugees should walk. The town authorities never notice. Why would they? They don't read bread. Historians debate how extensive this network really was. Some say it was nothing more than coincidence, that women were simply sharing housework. Others insist that if men had written it down, we'd call it intelligence gathering. The baby begins to wail again. Cyril sighs. Good lungs, she mutters. May he one day use them to beg his wife for forgiveness. You chuckle. She doesn't hear you, of course. Cyril's fingers are short and strong, and she moves like someone who has no time for your questions. She wraps the baby, slaps the father on the shoulder, and shoos him out the door. Then she sits down beside the mother, Miriam, her name is, and presses a warm cloth to her brow. You did good, she says. Not perfect, but good enough to brag. The mother smiles weakly. Her wedding ring slips on her finger, thinner now. Outside, the bells of the cathedral clang in the distance. A dog barks. A priest shouts at a drunk. Life goes on. Here's something you wouldn't expect. Jewish midwives were often called into Christian homes. Quietly, discreetly, and always for cash. Because even if you thought Jews were heretics, when your wife was screaming at death's door, you wanted Cyril. There's one recorded case, fringe detail alert, of a Jewish midwife who was excommunicated from her own community not for aiding Christians, but for charging them double and pocketing the coins in a holy book. The debate wasn't about her honesty. It was about her storage choices. Cyril, for her part, doesn't take sides. She takes temperature. She knows which mothers will make it and which ones won't. She knows which babies have a future and which ones need blessings now, before the fever hits. She's seen enough lifetimes to believe in none of them, and all of them. Before she leaves, she tells Miriam to name the child after her husband's uncle. The dead one, she adds. Not the drunk one. She ties her scarf, pockets a note from beneath a loaf on the windowsill, and vanishes into the alley. You follow her a few steps, your feet slipping on muddy cobbles. She turns left at the butcher's, right at the well. She stops at a door and knocks 5 times, slow, slow, fast, fast, slow. A pattern. A code. The door opens a crack. A hand reaches out, and she passes over a dried bundle of mint tied with twine. What does it mean? You'll never know, that's the point. You step back into the shadows. Another midwife walks by. Another baby cries. Another secret travels the alleyways. In the centuries to come, men will write books about bloodlines, dynasties, and great thinkers. But if they want to know how Jews survived plague, expulsion, pogroms, famine, tell them to follow the women. Not the leaders. The ones who boiled water and whispered warnings while pretending to argue over dill, and if they say there's no record of these women, you can smile, and say, exactly. You rise with the mist. It's Shabbat morning in Krakow, sometime around 1463. The synagogue is a low-slung building of carved timber and limestone, tucked like a spine between crooked streets. The walls lean slightly, as if bowing from centuries of whispered prayers. You slip inside with the early ones, the old men, the half-asleep boys, and the 2 travelers still brushing straw from their coats. The sanctuary smells of wax, wool, and wet boots. Overhead, candles sputter in an iron chandelier shaped like a lion. But your eyes are drawn upward, toward the women's gallery. The stairs creak under your step. You climb carefully, quietly. No one welcomes you here. No one stops you either. At the top, you pass through a wooden door, and the world softens. The women's gallery is narrow and dim. A wood lattice veils it from the men below. You can see them, just barely, but they cannot see you. That's by design. Modesty, they say. But it's also insulation. A hiding place. A court of its own. The women are already seated. Mostly older. Mostly wrapped in shawls the color of old paper, soot, and fog. Their hands are folded, but their minds are wide open. You sit beside one, she's named Neka, and immediately she leans toward you and says, that canter. Too much vinegar, not enough oil. You don't answer. She snorts. Good. Quiet. Stay like that. Neka's hands are gnarled from years of scrubbing floors, turning pages, kneading dough, and burying husbands. She's been a widow since she was 31. Her sister next to her, Zelda, was widowed twice. They call their row Beit Elmena, the widow's house, though no man ever named it such. They don't just pray here. They study. Not with books, with ears. With memory. With careful attention to the rhythms and cadences of the rabbi's voice. Every missed word, every hesitated citation, becomes material for later discussion. One leans over to whisper, that's not how the Rav said it in 43. Another replies, that was his father's ruling, not his. The first nods. Still better than this one's drivel. From below, the rabbi drones on. He is earnest. The men listen with polite boredom. The women listen like it's a second language they mastered out of necessity. Here's the uncomfortable truth, widows had time. That was their power. In a world where wives worked from pre-dawn until exhaustion, widows, especially those with grown children, gained a strange, precarious freedom. They attended services daily. They overheard legal decisions. They copied sermons by ear, committing them to scraps of cloth or the backs of old wedding invitations. historians still argue about whether women had access to Jewish legal discourse in 15th century Eastern Europe. Most say no. Some say, not officially. But letters from the period mention female advisors, matriarchs who interpreted, and one widow who reportedly corrected a visiting rabbi mid-sermon and was never invited back, though her correction was later cited as accurate. Necca once challenged a ruling on a burial fee. She claimed the gabbai had doubled it for widows without strong sons. When asked how she knew, she quoted a psalm, a proverb, and her dead husband's ledger. The gabbai returned the coins the next morning. Now here's your quirky detail of the day. In some Ashkenazi communities, widows ran underground matchmaking operations, completely independent of the official shadchanim. They met here. In this gallery, after services. They judged candidates based on shoe condition, singing voice, and the sharpness of their mother's tongue. 3 matches made in that gallery led to lawsuits. 6 led to emigration. 1 led to a husband who became a beloved peddler of velvet ribbons and pepper, and he credited his wife's terrifying aunties for the pairing. Below, the rabbi mispronounces a Talmudic tractate. A murmur ripples through the gallery like wind through grass. Necca rolls her eyes. Zelda mutters, he shouldn't have skipped breakfast. You smile. They nod at you, just once. Approval granted, you lean back on the wooden bench, arms folded, heartbeat slowing. Through the lattice. The sanctuary shimmers with candlelight. But up here, something more electric passes among the women, a current made of memory, mischief, and unspoken commentary. They have no podium. No official title. No scribe writes down their words. But they are the ones who remember when that cantor's voice cracked during a bris in 1447, and how the rabbi's wife fainted when he tried to bless the wrong couple at a wedding. They remember every birth, every scandal, every triumph. This is not a gallery. It's a court. And if you listen long enough, you'll realize, the verdicts passed here shape more than prayers. One day, a descendant of Necca, a woman named Leah living in London in the 1930s, will publish a book of family recipes. Buried in the margin of the Hallah page will be a single line, don't forget, we heard it first from Necca, in Krakow, upstairs where the air was thin and the truth was thick. And if you blink, you'll miss the moment, so don't blink, just sit. And listen, the air is heavy now, you're in a kitchen again, but it's different this time. The walls are thicker. The shutters are latched. The door has 3 locks and a 4th that's mostly symbolic. It's Erfurt, Germany, around the year 1475. A Friday afternoon, almost sundown. The house smells like rising dough, ash, and something acidic, like vinegar or fear. A woman kneads challah with strong hands and short nails. Her name is Baal. Her hands are dough-cracked, flour-dusted, and she works quickly. She has no time to waste. The sun doesn't wait for Shabbat. Neither do rumors. In the corner, her daughter is braiding candles, thick, clumsy wax strands twisted in a rhythm passed down through too many hands to count. The girl's fingers are sticky with beeswax and hope. You watch from a quiet space by the hearth. You'd like to help, maybe braid a little. But you'd get it wrong. Your candles would burn sideways. Your hallah would deflate in protest. You'd say something foolish like, why don't you just buy it from the market? And Baal would look at you like you'd offered her pork on a fast day, so you stay still. They're preparing for Shabbat, but not the way you know it. This is not peaceful humming and glass clinking. This is preparation like a fortress before siege. Every curtain drawn. Every draft stopped. Every step calculated, because earlier this week, a boy went missing. A Christian boy, and that means blood, not his. Whispers fill the town like smoke through straw. That Jews need Christian blood for Passover. That they mix it in their matzah. That they use it for rituals. That women, yes, the women, collect it while singing lullabies in secret cellars. The girl by the candles doesn't fully understand. But she knows that when the priest bangs his staff during sermons, Mama whispers her blessings faster. historians still debate the origins of the blood libel myth. Some trace it to Norwich in the 1100s. Others say it's older, born of superstition, envy, and a thirst for simple answers. But by the 15th century, it's as rooted in the Christian world as Easter lilies. And it has a particular edge against women. Because who, after all, prepares the bread? Who lights the candles? Who tucks in the children and sings to them softly in a tongue the town doesn't understand? Baal doesn't panic. She has no time for that. She's already hidden the family's Passover dishes in the attic, locked the spice box in a drawer, and warned her neighbors in code. The fish vendor shouldn't be trusted today. That means her son-in-law overheard a priest talking to a guard near the meat hall. Something's moving. She folds the dough into 3 loaves. A symbol, a pattern, a defense. She places them on a wooden board and slides them toward the hearth. Her daughter lights the braided candles. The flames catch unevenly. Baal steadies them with a sigh. Now, in that flickering light, the house becomes sacred. The stories say that when a woman lights Shabbat candles, she brings peace into the home. What they don't say is how often she lights them under siege. How often that peace is a defense strategy. A negotiation with the divine. See how I honor you. See how I cling to beauty. Keep the soldiers outside tonight. Here's something strange. Even in the worst of times, most Ashkenazi homes still insisted on fresh bread for Shabbat. Even if it meant smuggling flour. Even if it meant bartering earrings for yeast. Bread, they believed, was a promise. Not just to God, to each other. You smell it now, warm, yeasty, soft. A promise with a crust. Your quirky fact of the night. In some towns, Jewish women began braiding challah in patterns that mimicked protective symbols, a way of baking prayers into the bread itself. One design from Bohemia looks suspiciously like a chain-link fence. Another. A lion's mane. Baal's braids are simple tonight. Tight. No flair. They are meant to survive baking, not impress the neighbors. Outside, a bell tolls. Not for Shabbat. For curfew, Baal closes her eyes and blesses the candles. Her voice is steady, low, unmistakably powerful. Not loud. But final. The kind of voice you don't argue with. The kind of voice that draws an invisible circle around her home, and dares the world to step inside. Down the street, another family is doing the same. And another. And another. One woman's blessing spills out her open window, mingling with Baal's like braided smoke. This is how they survive. The next day, the boy will be found. In a field. Bitten by a dog, not a blade. But the rumors won't die. The baker who accused Baal's cousin won't apologize. He'll shrug. You can't be too careful. And Baal, she'll keep baking. Her daughter will grow up and tell her own children. This is why we close the shutters before Shabbat. This is why we never let the bread cool by the window. The candles will burn low, the bread will be torn, salted, and shared, and the woman who lit the flame, who whispered into the dough, into the dark, will remain forgotten by books, but remembered by her daughters, which, if you ask me, is the better kind of immortality. You wake to the sound of bargaining. The market is loud, not the chaotic clamor of modern noise, but the purposeful, rhythmic hum of survival. You're in Lublin now, in the early 1500s, the morning air thick with coal smoke and cabbage steam. You follow your nose to the market square, where voices rise like birds and carts rattle over stones older than anyone here dares to guess. You're not sure who you're following at first. Then you see her. She can't be more than 15. Hair tucked under a kerchief that's half unraveled, shoes patched with someone else's leather, and arms full of onions. She moves with the speed of someone who's been told all her life, don't dawdle. Don't speak unless spoken to. And if the tax collector smiles, don't smile back. Her name is Chana. Her mother's stall is small, a patch of dry ground, a crate of eggs, some thread, a line of pickles in jars that catch the morning light. Chana calls out prices in a sing-song voice, the kind that skips over insults and lands straight into memory. 3 eggs for a groschen. Threads from Krakow. Not the cheap stuff like hers. She nods toward the Polish woman selling beside her, who hisses something about garlic and stinking Jews. Chana smiles, big, sunny, and full of teeth. The kind of smile that's equal parts defiance and defense. Now, here's the part that surprises you, she's memorizing the Mishnah while she sells onions. Quietly. Under her breath, between each customer, she recites, Ein Schneem Akasen Betaleth. 2 people hold 1 garment. She mouths the ruling. Property law, if you can believe it. She's not supposed to know this. But her brother recites it out loud at night, and she listens while washing the floor. She always has. Her mother, Rivka, sits just behind the stall, head bent over a sewing project. She's letting Chana run the show today. Not because she's lazy, but because she knows, a girl must learn the market and the margins. Historians often gloss over market girls. They mention Jewish women in domestic roles or auxiliary participants in commerce. Which is a scholar's way of saying they were there, but we weren't looking. Yet they were everywhere, carrying, haggling, tallying, counting coins, dodging taxes with the creativity of poets. Some even acted as informal translators between the Jewish and Christian worlds, bartering not just goods but gossip and news. They were walking algorithms before algorithms existed. Chana doesn't think of herself that way. She just wants to sell enough pickled beets to afford a second pair of socks. Winter is coming, and her toes still remember the last one. A man approaches the stall. Tall, official-looking, hat tilted just so, a tax clerk. Chana doesn't flinch. She lifts her chin and calls out, "We don't sell to men who don't wash their hands." The clerk frowns. "Is your mother here?" "She's busy," Chana says. "Doing what?" "Being smarter than you." There's a pause. Then laughter, from a neighbor, from a butcher's wife, even from the Christian woman who called her stinking earlier. The clerk mutters something about insubordination and walks off. Rivka glances up, eyes sharp, one eyebrow raised. A little less pride, she warns, but still some pride. Chana replies. Rivka smiles. Barely. Here's your quirky fact, in several Ashkenazi communities, girls were given Sidurim, prayer books, with glosses in Yiddish specifically meant for female readers. These glosses often contained moral stories, household tips, and, occasionally, sly corrections of male-centric theology. One even included a marginal note, "Tell your brother this isn't how Rav Akiva said it." Chana doesn't own such a sitter yet. But she will, and she'll copy her notes in the margins with careful ink. She'll remember the faces of every man who tried to cheat her, and every woman who taught her to spot the lie beneath a smile. Years from now, Chana will marry a man who reads Torah in public and spills lentils in private. She'll raise daughters who can calculate interest faster than a banker, and sons who'll say, "Mama's Hebrew is better than the rabbi's, but don't tell him I said that." But for now, she counts coins. 3 copper. 1 silver. An extra coin slipped into her pocket by a grateful widow. She doesn't mention it. She just nods, once, and whispers another line of the Mishnah under her breath, Zeh shitaraf idi hatalith. The one who grabbed the garment. The marketplace swirls around her, colors, smells, clinking pots, and the crack of a dropped egg. A dog barks. A child yells. A woman curses. Chana keeps selling, studying, and surviving, all at once. You blink, and she's gone, but you can still hear the cadence of her recitation, like footsteps echoing into history. The house is dark, not from lack of light, but by intention. You're in a village near Lublin, sometime in the late 1500s. It's deep winter. Snow taps on the shutters like a careful question, and the chimney sighs with the low rumble of damp firewood refusing to cooperate. Down below, the men are still at the Beit Midrash, arguing about a line in the Gemara that, frankly, even they don't understand anymore. They'll be there for hours, puffing pipes, stroking beards, rearranging chairs as if that'll make the answer come faster. You, however, are upstairs, in a small attic, lit only by a stub of candle and the flickering coals from a tin heater, a woman leans over a desk made of repurposed crates. She writes quickly, dipping her quill in ink made from walnut husks, the kind that stains everything and everyone. Her name is Leah, she is the rabbi's wife. The Rebbetzin. And officially, she writes nothing, unofficially. She writes everything. At this moment, she is halfway through copying a section of Sefer Hasidim, her husband's notes from a lecture in Krakow, and, quietly, subversively, her own commentary in the margins. Tiny script, barely visible unless you know to look. A question here. A counterpoint there. A completely new insight, disguised as a footnote. If caught, she would say it's his writing. She's only helping. She's just organizing, but you and I know better, this is her theology. Her voice. Her mind, and it is sharp, she questions why women are always absent in mystical stories. She wonders aloud, well, in the margin, whether the Shekinah, the feminine presence of God, mourns when women are told to stay silent. She cites Rashi, then corrects him. Softly, you wouldn't survive one night in this attic. Too cold. Too quiet. Too much thinking, and the chair. A torture device made from 3 uneven legs and the ghost of a cushion, but Leah sits there night after night. After the children are asleep. After the soup pot is scrubbed. After her husband recites his final blessings and pretends not to hear her scratching quill, historians are divided on how literate Ashkenazi women were in the late 16th century. Some say they barely knew Hebrew. Others argue that women like Leah, wives of scholars, daughters of scribes, learned in private, absorbing Torah through osmosis and observation. There is one preserved letter. Unsigned, written in a fine female hand from around this time. It opens with, I do not speak in public, but I am not silent. Leah, I suspect, would nod at that. The attic smells of cold paper, smoke, and something faintly floral, maybe lavender. She keeps a bundle under her scarf to ward off the mildew. The candle sputters, but she leans in closer, eyes gleaming in the light like someone guarding treasure, because that's what this is, treasure, not gold. Not coins. But commentary. You see, while her husband debates whether a chicken touched by a Gentile is still kosher, Leah is busy preserving mystical interpretations of exile, grief, and joy. In her own words. In her own voice, and she's not the only one. Here's your quirky moment of the night. In one 1587 marriage contract from Vilna, the groom promises not only to feed and house his bride, but to provide her with fresh paper, ink, and wax for sealing. Scholars dismiss it as a scribe's flourish. I call it a quiet rebellion with office supplies. Leah's wax seal is simple, a circle with a slash, no name. She stores her writings under the loose floorboard behind the woodpile. If someone asks, it's just old kindling. If someone knows, it's enough to start a fire of another kind entirely. Downstairs, the men return, stamping snow off their boots and debating whether the Messiah will come on a Tuesday or a Thursday. Leah listens while stirring soup. She smiles politely when one asks, what do you think, Rebbetzin? And replies, I think Thursdays are better for travel. That night, when everyone's asleep, she adds a new note to the margin, even the angels rest on Tuesday. Centuries later, one of Leah's hidden pages will be found tucked inside a Torah scroll in a Krakow Geniza. The handwriting won't match any male scribe. It will be elegant, measured, and completely anonymous. The scholar who finds it will publish it as fragment of unknown female commentary, possibly folkloric. But her words will survive, and that, really, is the point, because while her husband's sermons will fade, and the students will misquote him, and the synagogue will one day burn, Leah's candlelit margins will whisper on, soft, bold, undeniable, like her. You're walking along a frozen path that was once a road, trees line the edges like silent guards. Your breath puffs in little clouds, and the crunch beneath your boots is sharp, ice over mud, broken only by the occasional hoofprint or stray coin someone won't be getting back. It's Lithuania now. Winter of 1611. You're somewhere between Vilna and a village so small it has no name, just a nickname that translates loosely to don't bother. You wouldn't last 2 hours here. No sense of direction, no fur cloak, no idea how to bribe a border guard without using the word bribe. But the girl ahead of you? She knows, she's maybe 17. Tiny, bundled, purposeful. Her name is Shayna. On her shoulder, a cloth sack stitched tight with twine. Inside, a few onions. A broken spoon. And a torn page of Psalms, hidden beneath the lining, and in her head, half of Ica, Lamentations, committed to memory, she sings softly under her breath as she walks. A lullaby, slow and rhythmic. It's in Yiddish, but the melody is unmistakably old. Older than this road. Older than this exile. A tune born from longing, passed down from mother to daughter like a pair of too small shoes. She is smuggling, not bread, not coins, but scripture. And songs, during this period, Jewish texts, especially those in Hebrew or Aramaic, were subject to confiscation, particularly in regions under Jesuit influence. While not outlawed outright, they were often deemed suspicious, dangerous, or too Jewish for their own good. Shayna's village had its collection burned 3 winters ago, so now, the women carry the words by heart. Shayna learned hers from her aunt, who would whisper psalms while darning socks. Every stitch, a syllable. Every dropped thread, a forgotten vowel. Shayna memorized not just the verses, but the exact inflection, the pauses, the aching hum at the end of each line. Tonight, she's delivering the verse to a cousin in another village, a girl who's just buried her mother and asked for something that doesn't end in silence. This is your quirky fact: in the 1600s, it was common for Ashkenazi women to weave scripture into lullabies. Not just because it was beautiful, but because it was strategic. If caught, they could claim they were just singing to a child. Who could accuse a mother's voice of heresy? But Shayna's not singing to a baby. She's singing to memory itself. The melody wins its way through the woods like a lifeline, soft but steady. You follow it, even though your ears are numb and your fingers feel like cracked wax. She doesn't slow down for you. She's done this before. Eventually, you reach the edge of a clearing. Smoke in the distance. A cottage. A dog barking once, then silence. Shayna crouches low and taps on a tree in a pattern. 1, pause, 2. She waits. A girl, maybe 13, emerges from the brush. No words are exchanged. Shayna places the sack down. The other girl picks it up. A nod. A murmur, and that's it. No ceremony. No scroll. No blessing. Just survival, wrapped in burlap and set to melody. Historians debate whether these transmissions were intentional acts of resistance or simply cultural necessity. As always, the truth lives somewhere in the middle. Shayna wouldn't call herself a smuggler. But she'd say, "If I don't carry it, who will?" Later that night, back in her village, she'll warm her hands over a fire made from wet wood and whisper a new melody to herself, one she's making up, just in case someone else needs a tune for morning that doesn't feel quite so lonely. Because here's what no one teaches you: the Torah doesn't always survive in ink. Sometimes, it survives in humming. Sometimes, it's stitched into the hem of a coat. Sometimes, it's written on the inside of a wrist, in invisible letters only a mother can see. And sometimes, often, it is carried across snow by a girl with cold hands and perfect pitch. You watch her disappear into the woods, the last note of her song curling upward like smoke. You try to hum it. You can't, but you remember the rhythm. That's enough. You are sitting at a desk far too small for your knees. The room is narrow, the ceiling low, and every surface is stacked with boxes, bundles, and ledgers bound in leather so worn it looks like melted parchment. You are in Frankfurt, 1642. A storm grumbles beyond the shutters. Somewhere, a rooster crows late, or early. Even the birds are confused. Across from you sits a woman who doesn't look up. She's scribbling in a book the size of a cutting board. Lips moving with numbers and names. Her spectacles, one lens cracked, sit low on her nose, and she smells faintly of cloves, dried rose petals, and permanent ink. Her name is Rukiel, she is the matchmaker. But not just any Shadchanet. Rukiel is the kind who terrifies rabbis and charms teenagers, often in the same breath. She finally looks up. You again. She says, you haven't spoken. But that's the kind of woman she is. She knows your type. Curious. Soft-footed. Not from around here, sit. Don't touch anything. You sit. You touch nothing. Behind her, a wall of drawers holds bundles of profiles, not photographs, of course, but descriptions. Names. Dowries. Habits. Notes like snores like a wagon, or reads Mishnah before breakfast, or mother negotiates like Pharaoh. Every name is a story. Every match a gamble, and what makes Rukiel remarkable is not her memory, though it's frightening, or her accuracy, though it's nearly mystical. What makes her remarkable is her fairness. She is, in essence, a judge. Unofficial. Unpaid, unless a match succeeds. And entirely female in a system where decisions are supposed to be made by men, but here, in this ledger-filled cave, her word is law. Isaac Goldstein, 22, she mutters, flipping a page. Says he wants someone pious. Means he wants someone quiet. Leah Bas Tzipora, 19, she adds, will break him like a noodle. Perfect. You raise an eyebrow, she notices, oh please, she snorts. You think men know what they want. A storm crack rattles the roof. She barely flinches. Here's your historical context. In 17th century Ashkenazi communities, matchmaking was one of the only spaces where women held consistent informal power, not as sidekicks, but as primary agents. Especially among widows, older sisters, and community matriarchs. And yes, sometimes, those women kept books. What's more, these matchmakers often functioned as emotional barometers of the community. They knew who had debts. Who had secrets. Who'd left town quickly. Who whispered when they shouldn't have, which brings us to your quirky moment of the night. One matchmaker from Moravia reportedly broke off an engagement after finding out the groom's dog barked at Torah readers. Bad omen, she said. The community laughed, until the groom eloped with a traveling wine merchant's daughter. The dog never barked again. Rukiel marks the page with a square of orange cloth. That means still in play. Then she pulls out another ledger. This one is different. Slim. Private. Locked. These, she says, are the ones I couldn't save. You hesitate, she nods. Broken matches. Bad endings. One girl went mute. One boy ran to Amsterdam. She sighs. Some people just weren't born to be seen by each other. She doesn't cry. She tightens her shawl and pours tea from a tin kettle warmed by a stone brick, and yet, she says, handing you a cup, they still come to me. Every year. Because hope, like cholent, only gets stronger if you leave it overnight. You sip. It's terrible. But warm, she returns to her ledger, muttering. You notice a page marked with your own name, or at least, someone like you. Wanderer. Listener. Unmarried. Curious. Might not survive shtetl life. Possible match, no one. She glances up, kidding. Sort of. Outside, the storm quiets. A new page turns. Rukiel leans forward and begins writing again, murmuring names into the candlelight like spells. The room grows softer. The scent of cloves deepens, and you realize, this ledger, this ink, these names, they are more than records. They're a map of longing. Of strategy. Of survival through connection. The quiet power of women who build families not by birth, but by boldness. One day, centuries from now, a genealogist will trace a famous family line back to R. Rukiel of Frankfurt. No further details will survive. Just that. Just her initial. Just her city, but in this room, in this moment, she is not a footnote. She is the architect of 10,000 futures. She scribbles one more name before blowing out the candle. You sit in the dark, unsure if your own story is being written, or read. Either way, you smile, because she's probably already matched you. You're in a graveyard now, but not the kind with marble angels and crisp lawns. This one is cramped, crooked, and cold. Stones tilt at odd angles, as if they've been leaning into the wind too long. Moss covers the Hebrew inscriptions like time's own handwriting. You tread carefully between the graves. Your breath frosting with every step. The wind here is thin and sharp, like it's been trained to whisper secrets only the dead should hear. The year is 1703. You're somewhere in the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, in a town so burdened with grief that even the chickens cluck in a lower register. In the center of the cemetery stands a woman. Her coat is black, but not from dye, just from years of wear and soot. Her scarf flutters around her face as she reads from a sheet of paper clenched in cold fingers. Her voice is steady. Low. Almost defiant. She is saying Kaddish, but here's the twist: no man stands beside her, no quorum of 10. No whispered approval from the rabbi. Just her. Just the dead. Just the ancient rhythm of a prayer usually claimed by male tongues, Yikadal v'yitkadash shmei Rabbah. You recognize the cadence instantly. It hums through the bones of anyone who has ever grieved in Jewish. But this one is hers. Not just in voice, but in construction. Because she's not just reciting the mourner's Kaddish. She's adapting it, adding names, adding meaning, adding herself. Her name is From. She buried her husband last week. Her eldest son, 2 winters ago. Her youngest, well, she never speaks of that. There are no brothers. No cousins. No men available to say the prayer in her stead. And even if there were, would they do it right? So From does what thousands of women before her only dared to dream. She takes the Kaddish and makes it her own. Some historians say it never happened. That women didn't say Kaddish until the 20th century. Others insist it was always happening, in kitchens, behind curtains, and here, in graveyards, without fanfare or footnotes. Evidence is thin. But there is a story recorded in an 18th century responsum, a woman in Galicia who stood up during a funeral and recited the Kaddish aloud. The men froze. One tried to interrupt her. She ignored him. She was never invited to another funeral. But no one forgot her name. From folds her prayer sheet and presses it to her chest. She doesn't weep. She doesn't scream. She breathes. In. Out. Steady. Each breath a continuation of her dead, not an end. Around her, 4 other women stand silently. One holds a tin lantern. Another carries a small bag of stones to place on the grave. None speak. None need to. They're part of what the locals call the Black Shawl Circle. Widows. Grievers. Unofficial mourners of the whole community. When a child dies, they come. When a husband disappears in the woods, they come. When no one else knows what to say, they show up and say it anyway. Not all of them recite the Kaddish. But they each carry a piece of it, in melody, in motion, in presence. From begins again. Her voice cracks slightly on the line V'al Kol Yisrael, and on all Israel. You feel that line settle deep in your chest like cooled lead. Because it's not just a prayer for the dead. It's a prayer for the living who carry death folded inside them like a letter they can't send. Here's your quirky note of the night. In some towns, women who recited Kaddish secretly developed alternate melodies, slower, more mournful, and distinctly feminine. One such melody was discovered in a Moldavian folk song collection mislabeled as a lullaby. It wasn't. It was grief in disguise. After the final line, the women place their stones. One crosses herself out of reflex. No one says anything. From tucks the sheet into her coat and turns to go, but you stay a moment longer. You look down at the gravestone, simple, cracked, its lettering softened by centuries. You can't read all the words, but but one line still glows, just barely legible, Sohar Lanefesh Hayakera, a window for a precious soul. You walk back with them through the snow. No one speaks. No one needs to. The crunch of boots, the breath in the air, the distant rustle of trees, it is all part of the prayer now, from will return tomorrow. And the next day. Until her voice doesn't tremble, but resonates, until the others follow, until it is no longer strange for a woman to mourn with words once held behind doors, until grief itself becomes genderless, and holiness, too. This time, you're inside a study hall, but not the one the men use. This one is across the courtyard, behind a low wooden door that creaks like an old rabbi's knees. The ceiling is lower, the benches are older, and the windows. Well, they don't let in much light, but that's fine. What matters here is ink. And what matters more is silence. You're in Prague now. Year 1728, the women are already seated when you arrive. You don't hear them at first. They move like ghosts. Quiet, coordinated, careful. But as you draw closer, you catch the scrape of parchment, the hush of pages turning, and, there it is, the soft slosh of ink being stirred in a small glass vial. One woman looks up, her name is Devora. Her fingers are permanently stained blue-black. The tips of her thumbs are calloused from centuries, yes, centuries in family years, of transcription. She is not a scribe. Not officially. But she copies texts. And not just for herself, she copies for them all. On the far bench, a young girl is reciting psalms aloud, her head bobbing like she's davening to the rhythm of her own breath. Next to her, a widow whispers corrections. Another woman takes notes in the margins of an old cookbook. Yes, that cookbook. The one that lists caraway as good for both digestion and widowers. You blink. You're not sure what this place is, neither is anyone else. It's not a school. Not exactly. It's not a synagogue. It's not a library, it's a room. A women's room. A space claimed, not granted, and it holds within it something astonishing, knowledge passed from hand to hand, in plain sight, yet hidden in plain ink. Here's your solid historical fact, in Prague. Records from the early 18th century reference informal women's study circles, often centered around a literate matron who shared texts, sometimes contraband, sometimes homemade, with a small group of students. These texts were often translated into Yiddish or annotated for clarity, complete with footnotes like, "This part is boring, skip to the next." One such circle was suspected of copying and circulating excerpts from Sefer HaChinuk, a text of 613 commandments, and adapting it for daily household reflection. In some versions, commandment number 32, to honor one's parents, came with a personal note, also valid when parents are stubborn, loud, or prone to commentary. Devora dips her quill and begins again. She's not copying Torah today. Today it's the Shivchai Habesht, Tales of the Baal Shem Tov. Mystical. Unofficial. Borderline heretical in some circles. But the women here drink in the stories like tea, especially the one where a poor woman's prayer lifts faster than a rabbi's because hers came through tears and burnt onions. As she writes, she mutters, not from forgetfulness, but to teach the rhythm, start with the miracle. Then explain the rabbi. Then the goat. There's always a goat. Your quirky detail tonight, in certain Ashkenazi homes, women kept secret gloss books, personal journals filled with Hebrew prayers, folk remedies, family gossip, and annotated religious texts. One discovered in Hungary in 1890 had notes correcting her husband's sermons, followed by a recipe for quince jam. Priorities, you see. Devora's book is different, though. It's not hers alone. At the back of the room is a small wooden cabinet. Inside are copied pamphlets, folded sheets, translated prayers, and small booklets stitched by hand, all written by women, for women. One copy of Aishat Chayil, a woman of valor, has the final verse rewritten, "Many daughters have done valiantly." But she also rewrote the last will and testament. Someone coughs. Someone laughs, a girl spills ink on her lap. She winces, Devora hands her a cloth without a word. They go back to work, because here, copying is sacred. Not just for preservation, but for participation. These women aren't just keeping the tradition alive. They're shaping it. Quietly. Invisibly. Through every comma, every footnote, every misremembered miracle recorrected by candlelight, you step back. You hear the scratching of pens, the rustle of shawls, the hum of a verse repeated until it becomes part of the floorboards. Later that evening, one of these copied pages, a single tale of a dream sent by Elijah the prophet to a woman with 7 children, will be slipped into the prayer book of a young bride, who will read it and weep and feel just a little less alone. You won't find this in a museum. No plaque will say here wrote Devora the unrecognized. But the ink remains, and the ink is enough. You're sitting at the back of a cramped classroom, wedged between a leaning bookcase and a pile of mismatched shoes. It's late afternoon in Mainz, around 1755. The boys at the front are yawning. The sun droops against the window, casting long golden lines across cracked tables and scribbled scrolls. At the head of the room stands the rabbi, old, gray, meticulous. He's teaching a passage from Bava Metzia, something about lost property and legal obligations. His voice creaks along, more from habit than enthusiasm, and then, a cough, from behind the curtain. That's where she sits, not in the classroom, of course. Don't be silly. She's in the next room over, behind a thin partition of wood and linen. But every so often, her voice threads through, dry and clear. Check Tosafot on that, she says gently. He's missing the context. The boys freeze. One chuckles nervously. The rabbi clears his throat. Yes, yes, very good, he murmurs, adjusting his spectacles. I was about to say that. You see, the woman behind the curtain is his wife. Her name is Rizel, and she's the reason the lessons make sense. She doesn't teach officially. She never signed a contract or took a title. But every evening, before the classes begin, Rizel reviews the rabbi's notes. She adds commentary, flags the contradictions, simplifies the legal language so it won't sail over the boys' heads like geese over rooftops. And sometimes, like just now, she corrects him in real time, softly. Kindly. Sharply, if necessary. Some say she was the daughter of a famed Talmudist. Others whisper she was self-taught, that she stole moments of learning from her brother's discarded texts and her father's nighttime debates. Most agree on one thing: Rizel knows the Gemara better than any man in town. Your historical anchor tonight: we have documented cases in 18th-century Ashkenazi communities of rabbis' wives, often called rebbitzins, functioning as behind-the-scenes scholars. Some even wrote teshavat, responsa, under their husbands' names, or corrected halakhic errors before they reached publication. Scholars like Bruriah, from earlier rabbinic times, were remembered as exceptions, but Rizel's existed quietly in nearly every generation. Your quirky moment: in a preserved letter from Galicia, one young rabbinical student wrote to his friend, "Our rabbi teaches well, but the real treasure is the woman who pours his tea and corrects his footnotes." Back in Mainz, Rizel's curtain sways gently with the breeze. You step closer, curious. Inside her room is a desk, smaller than her husband's, but far neater. A lamp with thick glass glows beside a bound volume of Shulchan Aruch covered in penciled notes. A stack of boys' homework lies in the corner, awaiting her uncredited comments. She reads quickly, redrawing the margins with her pen. One boy misunderstood the machloket, the legal disagreement, between two sages. She sketches a tree to show him. One branch for each opinion. A leaf where they overlap. Rizel believes in clarity. In diagrams. In giving students something they can actually use, not just memorize. She leans back. Her fingers are ink-stained. Her eyes are tired. She never wanted the spotlight. But she did want the wisdom. And wisdom, as it turns out, has a way of making itself known, even from behind curtains. Once a week, a student lingers after class. Leaves a folded note beneath the door: "Thank you for the parable." Or your example about the cart and the goat helped me understand the clause. Rizel never answers directly. But she leaves small additions in the next lesson. A tweak. A reference. A wink. Outside, the rabbi wraps up his lecture. Of course, he says, adjusting his cap, some say the real answer lies in humility. In knowing where your knowledge ends. From behind the curtain, silence, but you imagine Rizel smiling, because sometimes the most radical thing a woman can do is not insist on credit. It's not passivity, it's power in patient disguise. Later that night, she will light a candle, boil water, and read a new teshuvah from a distant rabbi. She'll correct 2 of his references. She won't write him a letter. But she'll fold her corrected copy and tuck it into her husband's bag, just in case it comes up during tomorrow's class, and maybe it will, and maybe he'll use it, and maybe no one will ever know it was hers, but the truth has a scent, like ink, like lamp smoke, like quiet genius, and it lingers. You're in a kitchen now, but it doesn't smell like soup, it smells like iron. And ash. And something sharp and floral, lavender maybe, or sage crushed underfoot. Candles flicker in the corners. A kettle hums on the stove. But this is not a kitchen for eating. This is a place for breathing. You're in a small shtetl near Brody, 1769. The wooden beams creak. The door is bolted. And in the center of the room stands a woman tying on a clean apron with hands that don't shake, even though yours would. Her name is Malka, she is the midwife, and this is the safest, and most dangerous, room in town. Midwives like Malka were many things at once: healers, ritual experts, birth guides, secret keepers. And in communities like this, they were often the only people who touched every stage of life, from first breath to last rites. She doesn't talk much. Not because she's shy, she just doesn't waste words. Her hands speak for her. They measure. Tie. Clean. Bless. Tonight, a girl in labor lies in the back room. First child. No husband. No questions asked. Malka has already boiled water, stitched clean cloths, and recited 2 psalms, one for strength, one for forgiveness. Now, as she waits between contractions, she opens a small book kept hidden under the loose floorboard beneath the kitchen table, a leather ledger. Inside are not accounts, not debts, not transactions, but names, dozens of names, some with birth weights. Some with notes. Some with no father listed, each entry written in the same tidy hand. Some followed by a single star. Some by 2, you don't understand the code. But Malka does. A star means a safe birth, 2 stars. The child survived a year. No star means she doesn't want to remember, but knows she must. Your historical anchor. Midwives in Ashkenazi communities were often among the most literate women, because they had to be. They read Hebrew prayers, Latin medical texts, and Yiddish folk remedies. Some were even trained by Catholic nuns, quietly, secretly. In cities where knowledge was passed like contraband, they were sometimes accused of witchcraft. Sometimes praised as saints. Usually both, depending on whether the baby survived. Malka flips to the back of the ledger and makes a new entry. She doesn't write the mother's name yet. That will depend on how the next hour goes. You hear a moan. Malka doesn't flinch. She wipes her hands, tucks the ledger away, and steps into the room with the focus of a general. Later, when the child is born, a girl, strong lungs, full head of dark hair, Malka will say nothing celebratory. Just, wrap her in the thick blanket. She'll run before she walks. But after they're asleep, Malka will return to the ledger and write the child's name in full, 1 star, then a second. And then, a strange addition, a line from Shir HaShirim, Song of Songs, scrawled in the margin, as strong as death is love. Your quirky moment tonight. In some shtetl communities, midwives would gift a baby girl a charm, a tiny cloth square with a single Hebrew letter stitched inside. No one knows what it stood for. Some say chai, life. Others say it was the first letter of the midwife's own name, passed like a blessing. Malka has a box of them. Sewn with thread made from old prayer shawls. She never charges for them. Malka knows every family's history. She knows who really married whom. Who cried for 3 days? Who came back from the woods with blood on their hem and silence in their throat? And still, she keeps it all, in ink, in thread, in memory. Centuries from now, someone will find her ledger in an attic, mistaken for a recipe book. They'll squint at the names, the stars, the strange poem in the back, and write an academic article titled, Female Healers and Symbolic Language in Early Ashkenaz. They will miss the point entirely, because this isn't a book of medicine, it's a book of mercy. You sit quietly as the house returns to silence. Outside, dogs bark. Inside, new breath fills the space. Malka pulls the blanket tighter around the baby, sets a bowl of soup by the sleeping girl, and extinguishes the candle. One birth, one secret saved, one line deeper in the ledger of women who held life in one hand, and never dropped it. You're in the back corner of a small, crumbling synagogue. The kind with more dust than daylight. The floorboards complain under your steps. The ceiling leaks in 3 places. And the Torah ark creaks open like it's telling you a secret it wasn't supposed to share, but the real treasure isn't up front, it's back here. At a desk no one uses anymore, except her. You spot her by the window, light falling across her shoulders like a silent benediction. She's maybe 15, maybe older. Her hair is pulled back with a bit of frayed ribbon. Her sleeves are rolled to the elbow, revealing ink-streaked forearms and knuckles bitten by winter. Her name is Miriam, she's the scribe's daughter, and she remembers everything. Her father, Reb Eliezer, is the official sofer, a sacred scribe, for this town. He copies Torah scrolls with a reverence usually reserved for royalty. He teaches boys the art of spacing, breath, and fear. He does not let Miriam touch the scrolls, but she watches, always watching, and memorizing, not just the words, the shape of them. How the letter Lamed lifts its head like a question. How Shin curls like a mother shielding her child. How Aleph looks like 2 hands disagreeing but holding on anyway. At night, when no one is around, she copies them in chalk on the walls of her room. She's filled the pantry with the entire book of Ruth, written between jars of pickled cucumbers and forgotten onions. Her mother doesn't mind. If the food is blessed, she shrugs, maybe it won't spoil. You step closer to see what Miriam's writing today. It's not a scroll. It's a book of names. She's compiling a private genealogical list, mothers and grandmothers and daughters, dating back 4 generations. Each entry written in neat Ashkenazi script, each with a story in the margins, like, Chana bat Malka. Once won a halakhic argument about fish bones. Still made everyone soup after. Or, Esther bat Gittel. Married 3 times. Outlived them all. Finally bought her own goat. This isn't a parody. It's a lineage. A scroll of matriarchs. A sacred inheritance, even if the parchment is scrap and the ink smells faintly of shoe polish. Your historical fact, while women in early Ashkenazi communities were typically barred from becoming official scribes, there are several hints, tantalizing, frustrating, that women engaged in informal scribal practices. Marginalia written in women's hands. Hidden glosses. Personal prayer books adapted and copied. Memory was survival, and women like Miriam became walking libraries. Your quirky detail. In one 1770 Yiddish folktale, a girl is granted the power to remember every word she's ever heard, including the ones not meant for her. She uses it not for gossip, but to rewrite a missing page of Torah after the original is destroyed in a fire. No one believes her, until they read it. Back in the dusty shul, Miriam dips her pen again. She writes the name Mirel bat Devora and pauses. Then, in the margin, carried stories in her sleeves. Told none of them unless asked twice. Miriam's father enters the room. He grumbles. He notices the ink on her fingers. The notebook. The faint outline of a letter bet drying on her wrist. He says nothing, but he leaves a fresh quill by her side before walking away. Later that night, she'll hide the book under the prayer bench. She'll tuck her curls under a scarf and help her mother fold laundry. She'll recite blessings over bread, tuck the younger siblings into bed, and sit by the fireplace until her eyelids dip like the vav at the end of a line. and she'll remember every letter, every name, every woman who refused to disappear between the lines. You will not find Miriam in the archives. No street bears her name. No formal text survives with her initials at the bottom, but maybe, just maybe. The reason a certain fragment of the Ailinu survived in an obscure 19th-century manuscript with an unusual flourish on the final nun, that was because Miriam once drew it that way. For beauty. For remembrance, for the women who came before, and weren't yet ready to be forgotten. You're sitting in the warmest room you've ever been in. It isn't large. A single oil lamp flickers overhead, casting gold across the wooden walls. A pot simmers on the hearth, thick with barley and something sweet, prunes maybe, or beets. The walls hum with the kind of quiet that takes a lifetime to earn. You are in a house in Lemberg, around 1795, and the woman across from you is old in that way that makes you sit straighter. Her name is Tsivia. But the children call her Bub Tsivia, and so do the grown-ups, and even the town rabbi, when he comes by asking for tea and advice disguised as casual questions. Tsivia is knitting. Slowly. Not because she's tired, but because she's memorizing. Each stitch is tied to a memory. Each row holds a story. And tonight, she has chosen one of her favorites. You listen, you don't speak. No one interrupts a grandmother mid-legend. The story is about her own grandmother, a woman named Chana, who once stood in the doorway of her burning village, hands on her hips, and demanded the Cossacks leave her soup pot alone. They did, about her mother, Gittel, who made a pact with a golem made of clay and gossip, and got 3 full years of peace out of it, about the night Tsivia gave birth in the attic while soldiers searched the house below, and still managed to whisper the entire Modeh Ani prayer before cutting the cord. None of these stories are written down, but they are real. You know they're real, because of the way she tells them. She doesn't blink when she gets to the hard parts. She doesn't soften the sharpness. But she never lets sorrow take the last word. She always ends with a recipe. A proverb. A joke about stubborn husbands and onions that refuse to cook. Here's your final historical thread. In many Ashkenazi families, the grandmother served as the final archive. She knew the names, the curses, the folk remedies, the dates of birth and death and debt. She was the one who insisted the family table stay whole, even if that meant carving extra legs. In rabbinic literature, grandmothers are almost invisible. But in reality, they were the memory keepers. The last word. The heartbeat between generations. Your quirky moment. One preserved diary from a Jewish merchant's granddaughter in the late 18th century refers to her grandmother simply as she who remembers. That was it. No name. Just the title. And in the margins, she knows what the men forgot. Tsivia leans forward now. Her shawl falls from her shoulder. Want to know how we survived? She says, in a voice as creaky as the stairs. We outloved them. She nods. We buried our men, our books, our names. We crossed borders with nothing but a pot and a prayer. But we kept the children warm. We sang to them. We sweetened bitter things. She pauses. We didn't vanish. She motions for you to open a small wooden box beside her. Inside are scraps, fragments of cloth, a broken spoon, a pair of reading glasses wrapped in an old ketubah. No gold. No treasure. Just proof. This, she says, is our museum. You sit back, you realize you've spent this whole story looking for heroes, loud ones, visible ones, written ones, but here, in the last stitch of the scarf, in the breath between Tsivia's words, in the hush before the soup bubbles again, here is a different kind of heroism, the kind that doesn't need your attention. Only your memory. Tsivia finishes the row. She ties the thread. She tucks the scarf into a basket full of dozens just like it. She made one for each grandchild, and 2 for the ones who never arrived. Outside, it's snowing again. Inside, the light stays warm, and you understand, the mothers of the Ashkenazi people didn't lead armies or write books with their names on the cover. They wrote us, one whispered story at a time. The fire dims. The scarf is folded, the steam from the soup curls toward the ceiling like the last breath of a lullaby. and the weight of centuries settles softly across your shoulders. You've walked a long road tonight, through shtetls and backrooms, graveyards and kitchens, secrets and songs. You've followed the invisible footsteps of women who weren't always named in the chronicles, but were never absent from the story. They were the breath beneath the blessing, the hands beneath the ink, the hearts that hummed lullabies woven from psalms and scraped together hope. They weren't queens. They didn't need to be, they were the glue. The thread. The lull between storms. The reason the next generation had shoes to wear and stories to tell. And now, you are part of it. Their memory is no longer hidden, you've carried it, even if only for one night, and maybe, just maybe, you'll remember their names in your own quiet way. So breathe gently now, let the cold night soften, let the warmth they left behind gather in your chest, and when you close your eyes, maybe you'll hear a voice, wise, tired, a little sharp, reminding you, we didn't vanish. We're still here.